What's going on, y'all? Today I want to review Astrobot. I beat it last week and I wanted to give some time, let the game digest, let the dust settle, but now I think it's time to talk about it, so let's get into it. What is Astrobot about? So for those of you who don't know, it's a platformer, and I hate to use the word in a definition, but in platformers you jump from one platform to another. Think like flat space of some kind that you're standing on. You either jump, climb, fly, glide, whatever. By whatever means you get from one spot to another, and you continue to do that until you reach the end of the level. And that's what a platformer is, and that's what Team Asobi set out to make. They're the developers of this game, and I think they did a phenomenal job. But let's get into the game now that you know what it is. Astrobot really knocked it out of the park with their graphics and art style. If I didn't know any better at a quick glance, I would have thought this was a Nintendo game. There's so much life and color happening on the screen at all times. And they did a really good job of making the game cater to like your inner child, but not too childish to where it would turn you off. There's like some kind of perfect balance that they figured out right there. And the last time I seen this kind of balance between, a colorful, vibrant game and really clean cut graphics was like Ratchet and Clank when the PS5 kind of first came out. And I gotta say, every step of the way is just as beautiful as the last. It's very inviting. It feels like you're a kid at a theme park. You're just oohing and ahhing as you look around at every map, just kind of soaking in all the detail and all the passion that went into the game. It's been a while since I've seen this kind of level of detail, and I think they absolutely smashed it. I love the graphics and art style for the game. So Astrobot's story is an interesting one. Not because the story has you wondering what's going to happen next. It's interesting to me because this game is so full of life and content, but the story is actually pretty bare bones because the story is pretty simple. You and your friends are traveling, you run into some kind of alien, he bullies you, he scatters you and your friends across the galaxy or the worlds or whatever you want to call it. And it's up to you as Astrobot, the mascot or the hero, to reunite all your friends and fix the spaceship that the bully destroyed and make your way out and fight the bully at the end of the game or whatever. And what makes it so interesting to me is that not a single time during the game did I think to myself like, man, what's going to happen next in the story, or what's the next plot point. I never crossed my mind that there were no cutscenes. I mean, there was like small interactions between the bots where they're like, like they're talking in your bot language or whatever. But me as the player, I never thought to myself like, what's going to happen next, or where am I in the story? It was the story was crafted in such a nice way that it really fit into the gameplay. So you knew you needed to collect the bots, you needed to fix the ship, and that was it. And like, you kind of knew where the story was at the entire time, but like in a weird subliminal way. It wasn't at the forefront of your mind, or at least it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, but it was there the entire time. And it was interesting how they did that, and how effective it was. But the story technically is not very original or impressive at all, but it is impressive at how it tied into the gameplay. And they do it in a way where it's not missing at any point in time. So hats off to them for that. Gameplay. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to chop this into two different pieces where I'm talking about how the game runs and feels, and then I want to talk about the innovation, which is a part of said gameplay, and how Astrobot separates itself from its competitors. First thing I want to know is that there were no bugs, I had no technical difficulties, I wasn't falling through maps, I didn't like have my game crash, no error messages. It was buttery smooth all the way through. It felt very good to play. Next, we have the controls, which were kind of weird. I want to preface this by saying that this was a tech demo for Sony, where they wanted to showcase like how the haptic feedback and how the controllers and how the gyro stuff, which is where you kind of tilt your controller, and like if you were driving a car with a controller, like that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if this game was supposed to launch way sooner than it ended up doing. But it feels like they were supposed to showcase it, but the PlayStation's been out for 4 years, so I'm not sure about that piece. But what I will say is that I think it's more of a preference thing for me. I did not like having to tilt the controller or aim with the controller. Like if I was like with like a minigun shooting at stuff, I had to like turn my controller. I did not like that. It's a cool novelty thing, but overall I didn't like it. But that's not to say that the game didn't do a phenomenal job making sure it works and runs the way it's supposed to, because that did. All the controls worked the way they were supposed to. There were no wasted buttons. If anything, they didn't use all the buttons, I think. I could be wrong there. But as far as the controls go, they all worked the way they're supposed to. And jumping and hitting enemies and the vibration, the feedback from that stuff felt good. It was very, like, it didn't feel weird to me. I enjoyed hitting enemies and flying and ping-ponging and all that stuff. That stuff felt great. But I don't, in general, not specific to this game, I don't like gyro features where you're turning your controller like, you know, like turning your Nintendo Switch if you're playing like Legend of Zelda, doing some kind of golfing thing or whatever. Like, I don't like that stuff, but that stuff worked flawlessly. I will say that. And I will say that even though I didn't like that stuff, the ideas that were attached to them were really well done. There's parts in the game where you're like on like a shuriken minigun, and you have to aim it and shoot it in the wall, and you're building a staircase for you to get off the minigun and then go up and climb, or spraying water or blowing trash away and stuff like that. Like, the way they used it was extremely creative, and I thought it was cool. I just don't like the feature in general, but you know, I'm going to give them credit where credit is due. The way they use the gyro and the aiming the controller and all that stuff was really, really well done. Haptic feedback felt good on the hands. It was a little weird, you know, to feel so much vibration from a game, but overall, I think they nailed the controls. When it comes to balance, the game is pretty balanced. If anything, I would say it's on the easier side, but I mean, you could tell the audience it was catered to, and that's okay. There are some more challenging segments of the game where you can kind of explore optional areas and find those things, and that's cool. But overall, I would say that if you just play straight through the main story of the game, then overall it was fairly easy, and it was still fun though. It never felt too easy to where it wasn't fun. They always did a good job of balancing those two elements. When it comes to replay value, there isn't a whole lot. This is probably one area that could have used some fine tuning. I mean, I still feel like I got my money's worth for the game overall, but maybe they would have added like ghost racing, where you're like racing, you know, like little ghost image of your previous time or whatever, or even just add time trials for you to beat. That could have added a little bit of content, but I mean, it's meant to be a single player one-time experience, and they did a good job. But just don't expect to be playing this game over and over again. It might be something you just revisit from time to time if you feel like it, because there's some really cool things about the game that I haven't talked about yet. The pacing of the game was kind of non-existent. You just kind of play when you want to. There was no real story for you to follow. The story is collect your friends and fix your spaceship. And after each section of the game, you kind of repair your ship, and you continuously find your homies as you navigate each individual level. So there's always a sense of progression, and you're always moving forward. But because the story is kind of vague-ish in a sense, or very simple, the pacing is just, it's kind of like, it's almost non-existent, but not in a bad way. When it comes to side content, there isn't a ton. Really, the only two things were like the secret levels, which I don't even know how you get, because I was 100% in the game, so I'm not sure if I was supposed to do something or what, but it just unlocked for me naturally. And then using the gacha machine at your home world to unlock costumes for your character, items for their homies who are hanging out in the home world. There really wasn't a whole lot. And then like the challenging levels, the challenging side levels that you kind of found by just kind of exploring the universe a little bit more. There wasn't a whole lot of side content, but it's not, I don't feel like this game needed side content. I feel like, you know, for the amount of time you put into it, the type of experience you're getting, I feel like it was pretty well done. And I think in most games, it would be kind of unsatisfying, but for this particular game, because it delivered so well on the general, you know, the main part of the game, the main story, that you didn't need a ton of side content. Sound design was good for all the special effects and all the things that were happening on screen, and then the music for the individual levels were also very energetic and matched them, and they knocked it out of the park. I don't have a lot to say there. So what makes Astro Bot so good? And we're finally here at the innovation part, which is the heart and soul of the game, in my opinion. And in terms of innovation, new things that you can do in the game, there are a handful of things, but individually they don't stand out. We'll still talk about them, but what really separates Astro Bot from all its other platforming competitors is that Sony is backing this platformer, and Sony is massive, and Sony has access to a lot of IPs. IPs mean intellectual property. So like if you create a character, that's your intellectual property. Intellectual meaning you thought it up and it belongs to you, essentially. So like in this game, they're bringing in all the different Sony IPs to dump them in this game and flex them and show them off. So like in this game, you'll see Kratos from God of War, you'll see like Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, and the list goes on and on. Some of the characters play smaller cameos where they just pop up for a few moments. Some levels and things are like designed after games and characters and whatnot. And overall, it's just a really cool nostalgia trip to see some of the older stuff, but also to see some of the cool newer stuff. And then they take it one step further where they build out levels for some of these intellectual property characters. Like there's a God of War level. There's a Nathan Drake level, which is really cool. Now, the mechanics themselves are things that existed in those games that they bring over to Astro Bot and copy and paste it. So that part isn't really innovative. The big piece of innovation from this game is that Sony is so massive that they were able to just drop all of them in here and just flex on everybody, because yeah, you can make a platformer, but how many platformers can you make that have cameos or other games in your platformer, you know? And I think that's the really cool piece. That's what really pulls people in. I mean, of course, the graphics and like the gameplay itself is really well done and it speaks for itself. But I would say that them being able to bring in all these different characters, and it's just like it's like mini blast from the past throughout the game, and it's really fun. So as I was making the video, I was thinking more about the innovation aspect and what are the new things that, you know, Astrobot brings to the table. And some of the things that I had in mind, after thinking about it a little more deeply, I actually kind of came to the conclusion that Astrobot, other than, you know, flexing all the different games across Astrobot, there is actually nothing really new or truly new added to the game. So for example, the things I was thinking about was like there's a part where you can turn into like a sponge, you can soak up water and you get big and then you shoot the water. The reality is that you're just shooting water. I mean, the way they made it look cool, but all you're doing is shooting water the same way you would shoot water in Mario Sunshine. Or there was like a vacuum pack where it's like you would put the vacuum up to the enemy and you could inflate them and then they'd explode. Or you could like stick it inside some kind of, I don't know what they were, like blocks, and you could like make the blocks big enough to be actually climbable. But in like Luigi's Mansion, you can suck things up and you can push air into things as well. And it's just like, oh, you know, I thought that was original. And then there's like a floaty thing where like you push a button and your character kind of turns into like this really floaty, like balloon-like thing, and you can kind of go really high up vertically. But again, that's not anything new. I mean, even in Super Mario, you can kind of go really high up when you get the raccoon thing or whatever. But I think the focus for this game is not so much that, hey, we're bringing new stuff to the table, although it's a tech demo and they show off the gyro controller and stuff like that, which we talked about. But also, I don't think it's just that. It's like, hey, look how good we've gotten at these things. It's like a different perspective look at it. And I think those features I talked about, they were fun to engage with. They didn't feel boring. It didn't make me think of those other things. I had to really sit down and think about it to come to that conclusion. So in terms of innovation, other than the IPs, they didn't really bring anything too much newer to the table, but they just really showcase how far they've come technology-wise and how well they are at doing some of these things that already exist. You know, we didn't see any new classic innovations like when the star in Mario first came out. You know, when they dropped the star power and you're invincible, it was like, whoa, you know, and it became an iconic thing where like your games, you turn invincible and you can't be touched. And that's how big that innovation was back then. And nothing like that exists currently in this game, but I still think they did a really good job just delivering on the things that they did put in. Overall, I had a lot of fun with the game. It was very engaging, you know, using all the different gadgets on each individual level, the color, all the life on the screen, the pace of the game was very go, go, go. It just pulls you in and you just want to go and explore and have fun. It's almost like you're a kid again playing the game. And it was just such a refreshing experience, because a lot of games these days, there's similarity, they're all kind of serious undertones. And there are some games out there that are lighthearted, but they're not quite as well done. It's like it's either one or the other. Lighthearted game with low effort, or it's, you know, a super high effort game but it's really heavy, really serious or something like that. But this was like a good mix of both, where it was a lot of effort and it was just a fun experience, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't already. I think if I had to grade this game, I think I had to give it 9 cans of Red 40 out of 10. I could easily see this being Game of the Year. Even though it's short, it was just a blast every single step of the way, and I definitely recommend you check it out. I will say my only other thing I will say about the game is that, one, I wish it had a little bit more content, and two, there were like these bonus levels in the game where like for example, the God of War level, like they chose like these secret levels to have a whole level based off of. And some of them that they chose, I was like, you know, maybe this one isn't quite as popular, but you know, this from an American perspective, so I got to think outside my box. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed the game, and hopefully this inspires other studios and developers to try, you know, things like this and just kind of see where it goes. But that's all I have for you guys. Hit that like button for your boy. Considering subbing, it would help me a ton. I do other kinds of gaming reviews and gaming related content, so if you want to see more of that, definitely subscribe to me. Comment what you think, and y'all stay safe out there, and until next time, peace.